Jason Cross wiped the sweat from his forehead and rolled his shoulders. The arena was massive, its towering walls carved from dark stone, pulsing with strange red energy. Thousands of Drexians, hulking warriors with glowing eyes and armor that looked battle-worn, stood in the stands, roaring in excitement. They were here for a fight. Jason wasn't. He took a deep breath, adjusting his stance as he faced his opponent. Varrock, the Drexian champion, the strongest warrior in the entire Dominion, 7 feet tall, all muscle, and holding a massive battle axe. Jason, he had a standard-issue Terran combat knife, a quick mind, and a very bad feeling about this. "I don't suppose we could talk this out?" Jason asked, flashing his best diplomatic smile. Varrock only growled. "You accepted the challenge, human. There is no retreat." Jason sighed. That was the problem. It wasn't even his challenge. His crew had docked on the Drexian homeworld for a trade deal, and somehow one small misunderstanding, involving a misplaced hand gesture that apparently meant "I challenge you" in Drexian culture, had led him to this moment, a one-on-one duel to the death. The air was thick with tension. The Drexians lived for battle. Jason, on the other hand, lived for not dying. The gong sounded. Varrock moved fast, too fast for someone his size. His axe swung in a deadly arc, cutting through the air where Jason had stood a second ago. Jason ducked, rolled, and scrambled backward, barely avoiding being sliced in two. The crowd erupted in laughter. "Fight like a warrior, not a coward," Varrock roared. Jason gritted his teeth. "I fight to win, big guy." He had no chance in direct combat, so he did what he did best. He thought fast. He eyed the arena floor. The Drexians had a ritual before every match, pouring war oil onto the battleground. It made combat harder, ensuring only the truly strong could stand their ground. But Jason had different ideas. He pivoted sharply, kicking a patch of slick stone just as Varrock lunged forward. The Drexian's heavy foot landed exactly where Jason had aimed. Varrock slipped. For a split second, the champion's balance wavered. It was all Jason needed. He rushed forward, dodging the axe, and slammed his shoulder into Varrock's knee, the only part of the warrior he could realistically hit. With his already unstable footing, the massive Drexian toppled over, crashing onto the stone floor. The ground shook. The crowd gasped. Jason wasted no time. He grabbed his knife and pressed it lightly against Varrock's throat, just enough to prove his point. The arena went silent. The Drexians stared in disbelief. Their champion had fallen. A human had defeated him. The referee, looking just as shocked, raised Jason's hand into the air. "The Terran is victorious." The silence lasted only a second before the entire arena erupted into cheers. Some were outraged. Some were impressed. Jason, he was just relieved to be alive. He stepped back as Varrock sat up, rubbing his head. The warrior gave him a long, hard look. Then, surprisingly, he chuckled. "Clever." Jason grinned. "I try." He was just about to leave when he felt a presence behind him. Someone had stepped into the arena. A Drexian warrior, moving with the confidence of a queen. The crowd roared even louder. Jason turned and froze. The woman stood tall, her gaze locked onto him with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "You defeated my brother," she said, her voice smooth but powerful. Jason blinked. "But yeah." She took another step forward. "Then by the laws of our people, you are now my mate." Jason's stomach dropped. Wait, what? The crowd erupted in celebration. Jason had survived the duel. Now, he had a much bigger problem. Jason Cross stood frozen, his brain struggling to catch up with what he had just heard. "Mate?" The word echoed in his head as the Drexian crowd roared in celebration, their cheers bouncing off the arena's stone walls. Some pounded their chests in approval, while others threw their weapons into the air in excitement. Jason, meanwhile, felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. The warrior woman took another step toward him, her piercing gaze never leaving his. "By our traditions, the one who defeats a family's champion may claim the highest honor, and I am the firstborn daughter of House Varrock." Jason blinked rapidly. "Right, okay." Just one small issue. I didn't actually agree to this. Varrock, still rubbing the back of his head after his defeat, let out a booming laugh. You fought with honor and cleverness, human. My sister is a warrior of great standing. This is the highest reward one could receive. Jason let out an awkward chuckle. I was thinking more along the lines of, I don't know, maybe a medal. A thank you card? Free drinks at the nearest cantina. The woman didn't flinch. Do you reject the bond? Jason opened his mouth, then hesitated. He glanced at the thousands of Drexians watching him expectantly. Rejecting her in front of them might be a terrible idea. From what little he knew about their culture, insulting a warrior's honor was a sure way to start another fight, and this time, he doubted he could win by making someone slip. His mind raced. How could he get out of this without offending an entire species? I think, he said carefully, that maybe we should slow down, get to know each other first. The warrior's eyes narrowed. A courtship trial, then. Jason had no idea what that meant, but it sounded a lot safer than immediate marriage. Yes, exactly. A trial. Varrock grinned. A fine compromise. You will undergo 3 trials to prove your worth as a mate. Jason's stomach dropped. Oh no. His new fiancée turned to face the crowd, raising a fist. The human accepts the trials. He will prove his strength, his wisdom, and his heart. The Drexians erupted in approval. Jason, however, was already mentally panicking. What kind of trials are we talking about? He asked, keeping his voice steady. His betrothed smirked. Survive them, and you will earn my respect. Jason swallowed. That didn't answer the question at all. Varrock clapped a heavy hand on Jason's shoulder. You are lucky, human. My sister has never taken interest in any warrior before. If you live, you may even grow fond of her. Jason forced a very weak smile. Right, lucky me. Later that night, Jason sat at a massive banquet hall, surrounded by Drexian warriors feasting on roasted meat and strange glowing drinks. He had barely touched his plate. His mind was too busy spinning. The woman sat across from him, watching him with an amused expression. I never asked your name, Jason said, trying to sound casual. She raised an eyebrow. You did not. I am Zarakai. Jason nodded slowly. Zarakai. Got it. So, about these trials. She leaned forward slightly. Do you fear them? Depends. Will I have to fight a giant beast, walk through fire, arm wrestle a warlord? Zarakai took a sip of her drink. Yes. Jason choked on his own. Do not look so worried, she added with a smirk. If you fail, you will simply be considered unworthy. Jason sighed in relief. Oh well, that's not so bad. Zarakai continued, and then my clan will hunt you down for dishonoring me. Jason froze mid-sip. She let the silence hang for a moment before finally cracking a small smile. I jest, human. Jason exhaled, running a hand down his face. Oh great, you've got jokes. Zarakai leaned back. You have spirit. That will serve you well in the first trial. Jason narrowed his eyes. Which is? She tilted her head. It begins at sunrise. Jason groaned, rubbing his temples. Of course it does. As the banquet continued, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just gotten way more complicated. And the worst part, a very small part of him might actually be looking forward to it. The first thing Jason noticed when he woke up was the roaring of a crowd. The second thing was that he wasn't in bed anymore. Instead, he stood in the center of a massive coliseum, the rising sun casting long shadows across the ancient stone walls. Thousands of Drexians watched from the stands, their armor glinting in the golden light. The air buzzed with anticipation. Jason blinked groggily. Did someone carry me here in my sleep? A deep chuckle came from beside him. He turned to see Varrock standing with his arms crossed, watching the arena floor. You slept deeply, Varrock said. A good sign. Many do not sleep at all before their first trial. Jason stretched his arms, still half asleep. Right. First trial. Refresh my memory. What am I doing again? A loud thud echoed across the arena as a massive steel gate on the far side slammed open. Jason's blood ran cold. I was afraid you'd say something like that. From the darkness beyond the gate, a deep guttural growl sent a shiver up his spine. A moment later, a beast emerged. It was massive, easily 3 times Jason's size, with muscles like boulders and sharp, gleaming tusks that curved upward like scythes. Its deep-set eyes burned with raw fury, and its thick hide was covered in jagged scars. Chains dangled from its wrists, snapping as it moved. Jason took a slow step back. Okay, that thing looks very, very angry. Zerakay's voice rang out from the stands. You must defeat the Gorath. Jason looked up at her. That's nice. Any tips? Weak spots? Off buttons? Zerakay smirked. Try not to die. Jason exhaled sharply. Helpful. The Gorath let out a bone-rattling roar and charged. Jason barely had time to react. He threw himself to the side just as the beast's massive fist slammed into the ground where he had been standing. The impact sent up a cloud of dust and cracked the stone beneath it. Jason scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. No way he could match this thing in strength. He needed to be smart. Fast. The crowd cheered as he dodged another swing, rolling just in time to avoid being flattened. He needed a plan, and he needed one fast. His eyes flicked across the arena. Then he spotted it. A broken spear shaft lying near the edge of the Colosseum floor. Bingo. Jason sprinted toward it, but the Gorath was already reacting, turning to chase him down. Oh, come on, Jason shouted, ducking under a wild swipe. He reached the spear, grabbed it, and spun around. The Gorath lunged. Jason sidestepped at the last second. Using the beast's own momentum against it, he jammed the broken spear into the soft part of its leg. The beast howled in pain, stumbling forward. Jason didn't wait. He ran toward a nearby stone pillar, then turned back to see the Gorath recovering. The beast locked eyes with him. It was angrier than ever. Jason grinned. Good, now come get me. The Gorath charged again. Jason timed it perfectly. Just as the beast reached him, he leaped aside, letting its full weight crash into the pillar. The stone shattered from the impact, sending a massive chunk crashing down onto the Gorath's back. The beast groaned and collapsed. The arena fell silent. Then, cheers erupted. Jason, panting, wiped sweat from his brow. He actually did it. Varrock laughed heartily. Clever, you fight with the mind of a true warrior. Zerakay nodded approvingly from the stands. You live to face the second trial. Jason exhaled and put his hands on his hips. Great, that was easy. The Gorath twitched. Jason froze. Then the beast let out a weak whimper and passed out. Jason sighed. Okay, now it's easy. As the Drexians roared in celebration, Jason glanced up at Zerakay. She was watching him with a new look in her eyes. Something told him the real challenge had only just begun. Jason barely had time to celebrate his victory before the next challenge began. The arena gates rumbled open once more. This time, no massive beast emerged. Instead, a tall Drexian elder, draped in dark ceremonial robes, stepped forward. He carried an ornate metal staff, its surface carved with glowing runes. Behind him, a group of scribes unrolled a massive scroll filled with strange symbols. Jason glanced at Varrock. Did I just win the wrong game? Why do I feel like I'm about to take a math test? Varrock grinned. This is the trial of Karan's mind, a battle not of strength, but of strategy. Jason sighed. Of course. So, what, we play chess? The elder raised his staff. The challenge is simple, he said. You must solve the riddle of the 9 suns, a puzzle only the wisest of our warriors have ever answered. Jason rubbed his temples. You guys really love your trials, don't you? Zerakay stood in the royal box, watching him closely. If you are to stand by my side, you must prove your mind is as strong as your body. Jason blinked. Was that approval in her voice? A Drexian warrior placed a strange cube in front of him. It was smooth, metallic, and covered in shifting symbols that glowed faintly. Jason knelt down, inspecting it. All right, I just need to, unlock it. The elder nodded. If you fail, the cube will shatter, and your trial ends in disgrace." Jason grimaced. No pressure. The crowd fell silent as Jason turned the cube in his hands. The symbols shifted whenever he touched them, rearranging into patterns he couldn't recognize. It wasn't random. There had to be a system. He took a deep breath. "Okay, think, Jason." He noticed something. Some symbols glowed brighter when touched together. Jason smirked. "Oh, it's a logic puzzle. I can do logic." Varrock muttered. He speaks to himself. This is not a good sign. Jason ignored him, focusing on the cube. The symbols seemed to form a star map, but only when arranged correctly. Slowly, he moved the glowing pieces, aligning them into a recognizable formation. The Drexians watched in suspense as the cube clicked and shifted. The Elder's eyes widened. Jason was solving it. Jason grinned. "All right, last move." He pressed the final symbol. The cube let out a soft hum and unfolded like a blooming flower, revealing a glowing crystal sphere at its center. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Elder stepped back, shaking his head in astonishment. "He has done it." Jason stood up, tossing the solved puzzle between his hands. "Well, that wasn't so bad. What's next?" "A cooking contest." Zerakay's gaze was locked onto him, unreadable, but there was a flicker of admiration in her expression. Varrock clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You are proving yourself, human, but there is one final trial before you may claim victory." Jason groaned. "Of course there is." From above, Zerakay's voice rang out. "The final trial is me." Jason's stomach dropped. Say what now?" Zerakay leaped down into the arena, landing gracefully. The crowd roared. Jason looked at Varrock. "You could have warned me about this part." Varrock smirked. "Where would the fun be in that?" As Zerakay drew her twin blades, Jason exhaled. Great, he'd just beaten a monster. He'd just outwitted an ancient puzzle. Now he had to fight his future wife. The arena was deathly quiet, the air crackling with anticipation. Jason stood in the center, facing Zerakay, who now held two razor-sharp blades, her stance poised and ready for battle. Her eyes locked onto his with a gleam of challenge, a flicker of amusement dancing within them. It was clear that she wasn't going to hold back. This wasn't just a test of strength, it was a test of will. Jason gulped. Fighting a beast was one thing, outsmarting an ancient puzzle was another, but fighting Zerakay, the sister of the galaxy's strongest warrior, was a whole new level of terrifying. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a queen in the making, someone who commanded respect and power. "Do you really think you can defeat me, human?" she asked, her voice low but laced with humor. Jason hesitated, then raised his hands in mock surrender. "I mean, you did just watch me solve a logic puzzle. That's gotta count for something, right?" The crowd laughed, and even Zerakai's lips quirked into a small smile. But there was no time for jokes. With a swift motion, she lunged toward him, her twin blades slicing through the air. Jason's reflexes kicked in, and he dodged just in time, rolling to the side. The sharp edges of her blades missed him by inches. "Nice try," he said, out of breath. "But you might need to try harder than that." Zerakai's expression shifted from amusement to pure focus. She twirled her blades, the sound of the metal cutting through the air almost musical. Jason backed up, thinking fast. He was a good fighter, sure, but he wasn't a trained warrior like her. His best bet was to outsmart her, to get inside her head. He needed to make her lose her concentration. "You're not just testing my strength, are you?" he called out, trying to distract her. "You want to see if I have the courage to fight someone I care about." Zarakai paused, her movements momentarily faltering. Jason saw the opportunity and dashed forward, trying to catch her off guard. But Zerakay wasn't a novice. With a quick twist, she sidestepped, sending him crashing to the ground. "You are persistent, human," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "But persistence alone won't win this battle." Jason groaned, pushing himself up. "You know, for someone who's probably about to kick my butt, you really know how to talk." Zarakai raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his playful defiance. "You continue to surprise me, Jason." Jason took a deep breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had to think of something else. He couldn't keep up with her speed, but maybe he could get inside her mind. "Look," he said, standing tall, "I'm not here to win by brute force. I'm here to show you something more important." Zora Kai stepped forward, her blade still held at the ready. "And what is that?" "I'm here to prove that we can make it work," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I know we come from different worlds. I know you think my human ways are, well, ridiculous sometimes. But the truth is, I'm not afraid of you. Not because I think I can beat you, but because I think we can be something stronger than just warriors. We can be a team." There was a pause. The crowd held their breath, and Zora Kai's eyes softened, the blade still in her hands, but no longer raised in threat. Her expression softened, and for the first time, Jason saw a flicker of something deeper in her gaze. "You are not like the others," she said quietly, her voice low and almost vulnerable. "You do not just see strength, do you? You see more." Jason took a step closer, carefully, slowly. "Strength is important, yeah, but it's the strength of the heart, of loyalty, of trust, that really matters." For a moment, Zora Kai was silent. Then, slowly, she lowered her blades, her body language shifting from warrior to something more vulnerable. "You speak truths that no one has dared speak before," she said softly. Jason smiled, heart pounding, but not from fear this time. This was the moment, the turning point. "I don't want to fight you, Zora Kai. I want to stand by your side." Zora Kai finally dropped her weapons to the ground. The crowd erupted into applause, but Jason barely noticed. He was focused entirely on her, and for once, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. "You have passed the trial, human," Zora Kai said, her voice soft and sincere, "not through strength, but through heart." And with that, she reached out, taking his hand in hers. The air around Jason and Zora Kai was thick with the weight of unspoken emotions, the kind that had been building up between them ever since they'd first met. The entire arena had gone silent, and for the first time, Jason wasn't sure if the crowd's cheer mattered. The only thing that mattered now was Zora Kai and the sudden shift in their relationship. "You really do think differently, don't you?" Zora Kai said, her voice a soft melody that almost blended with the hum of the surrounding stars. Jason gave her a crooked smile. "I guess so, but hey, I've always been the kind of guy who tries to see the world a little differently. Guess that's why I'm still alive after all the chaos." Zora Kai let out a short laugh, her eyes flickering with amusement. There was something different now, something he couldn't quite place, but it made his heart race faster. "You've outlasted more than any human I've ever met," she said. Her voice held a softness that he hadn't heard before. "But now we must return to your people. We have to begin the official proceedings. The court and our families will want to know what happens next." Jason straightened, feeling the sudden tension in the air. "Proceedings?" he asked, his voice unsure. Zora Kai's expression softened, but her eyes still held an unreadable edge. "Yes. There are rituals to be performed, agreements to be made. You will need to meet my family and prove your worth as a warrior and as my future partner." Jason blinked, his heart dropping into his stomach. He'd been joking, right? He'd just meant to impress her, to win her over with his human perspective on strength and loyalty. But this was something else. "You're saying," he trailed off, trying to find the right words, "you're serious about this, aren't you? About us?" Zora Kai looked at him, a small smile curling the corners of her mouth. "I am. We can't hide from what is inevitable. You defeated my brother in combat. You showed your strength, not just in battle but in heart. You fought for more than yourself, and in doing so, you earned my respect." Jason's throat went dry. "But I don't know the first thing about alien customs, Zora Kai. I mean, come on. I'm just a guy who used to play video games and get in trouble on Earth. This is a whole new level." Zora Kai stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "That's exactly why you will succeed." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I've never met anyone like you. I don't expect you to be like the others. I need you to be you." Jason felt his chest tighten. She was serious. All the joking around and the fast talk, the moments of humor between them. It wasn't just a way to pass time. She meant it. His mind was racing. And what happens after we get through these proceedings? Zarakai's eyes softened as she reached out and gently touched his hand. We'll find out together. If you can navigate the customs and challenges, we'll have a future. If not, then we part ways. But I have to know, Jason. Her eyes searched his for an answer. Can you commit to this? To me? To what lies ahead? Jason stared at her for a moment, trying to imagine his life, their life, together. It would be unlike anything he'd ever imagined. The world he knew was Earth, simple and familiar. But Zarakai's world was alien, vast and full of political intrigue, honor codes, and customs that he would never have guessed in a million years. Could he do it? Could he fight not just for himself, but for something more, something that involved her, Zarakai? His heart gave him the answer, and with more conviction than he ever thought he had in him, he looked into her eyes and said, "Yes, I can do this. I'll fight for you. I'll fight for us." Zarakai smiled, and Jason felt a warmth spread through him, as though the very stars themselves had aligned at that moment. Then we begin tomorrow. The rituals, the trials, they will not be easy, but nothing worth having ever is. Jason nodded, feeling a mix of nervous excitement and determination. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for sure: this was a fight worth having. The crowd, which had been silent for what seemed like forever, suddenly erupted in cheers. Zarakai took his hand in hers, and for the first time since meeting her, Jason truly felt like he had a place in the universe, a place with her. As the cheers echoed around them, the two of them stood together, facing an uncertain future, but it was a future they would tackle as one. Jason stood in the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by the silent, intense gaze of Zarakai's family. The room was a grand hall, its high ceilings and intricate designs all reminding him that he was far from Earth. The air was thick with the energy of thousands of years of history. As Zarakai's voice echoed through the room, explaining his place here, Jason couldn't help but feel out of place. He had just entered the alien capital with Zarakai at his side, but the reality of it all was hitting him hard. His world was one of simple logic and reason. This was nothing like that. The people before him followed rules and customs so old, they felt more like sacred rituals. "I know this is all new to you," Zarakai whispered to him as they waited for the proceedings to begin. "Just remember, the challenge will test your spirit as much as your strength. There's more at stake than just defeating warriors." Jason nodded, trying to stay calm. He had gotten through the arena challenges, but this was about Zarakai, her family, and their traditions. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. This was for his future, for their future. The ancient leader of the clan, Voromai, an elder with a long robe and a deep voice that seemed to shake the very foundation of the room, stepped forward. His sharp eyes, full of wisdom and power, locked onto Jason's. Zarakai moved closer to Jason, her presence a calm, steady force beside him. "You come before us, human, not just to prove your worth in battle, but to show your respect for the ways of our people," Voromai declared. "This will not be easy, nor should it be. The challenge will test more than your body. It will test your heart and soul." Jason clenched his fists, his mind racing. "I get it. I'm ready for whatever comes next." Zarakai gave him a brief, reassuring smile, but there was an edge to her expression that suggested she was just as unsure as he was about what was coming. But she believed in him. That was enough to push him forward. "First," Voromai continued, "you must face the trial of the mind. This will test your ability to think beyond the limits of your human experience. Only if you can answer the questions posed will you proceed to the trial of the heart." Jason felt his nerves jump. Trial of the heart, he thought. Great, just what I need. More pressure. A cold wind swept through the chamber, and an eerie silence fell. Several elders moved to either side, each holding a small glowing crystal in their hands. With a wave of their hands, the crystals floated into the air, and the air around Jason began to shimmer. Suddenly, images flashed before his eyes, strange, unfamiliar scenes. The face of a woman he didn't know, a dark figure in a forest, a battle he couldn't quite place, and then a bright, overwhelming light. The images stopped as suddenly as they had started. "Tell us what you saw," Voromai commanded. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't seen any of those things before, but he knew what he had to do. "I saw a woman, a dark forest, and a light." He hesitated. It was as though something was trying to pull me forward, but I couldn't get to it. There was a long silence. Jason's stomach twisted with uncertainty. Had he failed? Zorake squeezed his hand, offering him a look of silent support. He could feel her strength, her belief in him, even though his own confidence was slipping. The elder who had been holding the glowing crystal spoke next. "The images you saw are not just random. They represent the struggles of your heart and the choices you will have to make. A warrior's mind must be clear, but his heart must never be clouded with doubt." Jason swallowed hard. He didn't know how to respond to that. But then Zorake spoke softly, her voice cutting through the tension. "You passed the trial of the mind." Voromai nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly in approval. "Yes, you answered well, human. But the trial of the heart awaits." The ground beneath them shifted, and a massive stone door slid open, revealing a second chamber. This one was darker, the shadows creeping along the edges. Jason had no idea what awaited him, but he could feel the stakes rising. This wasn't just a test for him, it was a test for their future. Zorake leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear. "This next one, it's the hardest." Jason turned to her, his heart hammering. "I'll do whatever it takes." And with that, they stepped into the darkened room together, ready for whatever came next. The dark chamber was silent, save for the distant hum of energy flowing through the walls. Jason's heart raced as the heavy stone door shut behind them, leaving him and Zorake alone in the shadowed space. He could feel the weight of her presence beside him, her quiet strength grounding him as the air around them thickened with anticipation. "Are you ready?" Zorake's voice was low, but there was an undeniable edge of concern in her words. Jason nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I don't think I've ever been more ready." The trial of the heart was supposed to be the hardest, but he wasn't sure what that meant yet. The room was filled with a strange energy, a deep pulsing sensation that seemed to come from the very walls. He could hear whispers, soft and unintelligible, but they sounded so close, as though the chamber itself was alive. Zorake squeezed his hand. "The trial is not about defeating an enemy or overcoming an obstacle," she explained, her voice steady despite the unease in her eyes. "It's about facing your deepest fears, your greatest doubts. You must be willing to open your heart, to let go of your past, and choose the path ahead." Jason frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "You're saying I have to face myself?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "This is the hardest part for any warrior. The heart holds the greatest strength and the greatest weakness." Suddenly, the whispers in the room grew louder, almost deafening. The air shifted, and before Jason could react, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead. It was a distorted version of himself. The figure was him, but not. It was everything he feared about himself, every mistake he had ever made, every failure that weighed on his mind. The figure smiled, a cruel, mocking expression. "So this is what you've become," it sneered. "A human, trying to fit into a world far beyond your understanding. You're nothing but a pawn in a game you can't even begin to comprehend." Jason's stomach twisted. The figure's words hit too close to home. He had never truly felt like he belonged here, like he was meant to be part of Zorake's world. He had come so far, fought so many battles, but there was always that voice in his head, telling him he didn't deserve this, didn't deserve her. Zorake stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "This is not you, Jason. Don't listen to it." The figure laughed, a sound that made Jason's blood run cold. "She's right, isn't she? You're just a man. You can't possibly understand the customs of my people. You're weak. You'll never be a part of this world. You'll fail." Jason's hands clenched into fists, the words stinging. But Zorake's voice, strong and unwavering, cut through the doubt. "You've already proven yourself in ways that matter, not in battle, but in your heart. You've shown that you can love, that you can fight for what matters, no matter the cost." Jason turned to her, the fire in her words lighting something deep within him. Her faith in him, her belief, was all he needed. He wasn't just some weak human. He was here because he had proven himself time and time again, and now he had something he couldn't lose. Her. With a deep breath, Jason stepped forward, facing the distorted version of himself. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice strong. "I may not be perfect, but I'm here because I believe in something greater than myself, and nothing you say can change that." The figure snarled, its form flickering, as though it was starting to fade. "This isn't over. You can't escape your doubts forever." But Jason didn't listen. He reached out and touched the figure's chest, his hand passing through it. As soon as he did, the figure dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind a feeling of emptiness, as if a weight had been lifted. Sci-Fi moved to his side, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with pride. Jason looked down at her, his heart racing. He had done it. He had faced his fears and doubts, and he had come out on the other side stronger for it. The air in the room began to settle, and the whispers faded. Jason and Sci-Fi stood together, the final trial now behind them. But there was no time to relax. The real challenge was yet to come. "You're ready," Sci-Fi said softly, looking into his eyes. "We've done it together. And now, we move forward." Jason nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. No matter what came next, he knew they would face it side by side, and that, he realized, was the only thing that truly mattered.